Hi, welcome to Seaside Quilting Tutorials. My name is Terry, and today we're going to be making the Easter Parade table runner. I'm using the Henry Glass & Company pattern, and instead of using the Easter Bunny type fabrics that we would normally use for an Easter project, I'm using the Lavender Garden beautiful fabrics from Henry Glass. They are absolutely gorgeous with some batiks thrown in. And it's coming out very beautiful. We've already done the placemats, so today we're going to be doing the table runner. So let's go ahead and get started on that. So your first step is to go ahead, cut out all your pieces and do all your subcuts. That way you can have all your pieces of fabric right near you to be able to go ahead and sew without having to get up and cut each piece as you need it. Or at least that works best for me. So to make your square in square, and that's what we're going to do first. And it's what I did was after I cut out all my smaller squares, I went ahead and I made my diagonal line from corner to corner. It just makes it so much easier to go ahead and do all those pieces ahead of time. And then you don't have to mess with it in between sewing each one. So you're going to take your first little square and you're going to put it on your larger square so that your diagonal line runs from the corner down here to the corner up here, or to the middle up here rather. So first you just want to make sure that you have it adjusted like that, lined up really well. And then we're going to sew a diagonal line from this corner to that corner, following the line that you drew. Let me just change my foot out. And I'm using 2.0 stitches when I'm doing this. Let me just get that set up on my machine now. Okay, so let's go ahead. We're going to sew right across that line, making sure that you keep your pieces lined up. And if it makes you feel better, you can always put a little clip up in the corner over here just to hold your pieces together while you're doing your diagonal line, to know that it's not going to shift. And I just make sure that the center red line on my foot is lined up with my line that I drew. And you'll go ahead and sew a straight line. I'm going to turn my machine down just a little bit. Okay, so then before I bother to do any cutting, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to put my bottom piece on. And I'm going to line it up. Let me make sure I have this going in the right direction before I tell you. Yeah. So I do diagonally, I do my corner up here, and then I'm going to do my corner down at the bottom. And I'm going to put a little clip on that corner just to make sure that my fabric doesn't shift while I'm sewing. And I'm going to sew that diagonal line. go ahead and trim your threads while you're right here, then you don't have to bother with doing that after. Just gets them out of the way. So our next step is that we're going to trim this piece off, but we need to leave ourselves a seam. So we're going to match up our ruler on this line so that we are cutting and leaving a 1/4 of an inch seam right across here. So let's go ahead and do that. Got to grab my ruler. So I'm going to place my ruler on here, and I'm going to match up the line that I sewed, leaving myself a 1/4 of an inch from that line to the edge of my ruler. And then I'll go ahead and I'll cut that. And then I'm going to do the same on the bottom. You see, make sure that I'm getting this in the camera for you. So once again, I'm just going to line up my ruler so that my line is lined right up with my stitching, leaving myself a 1/4 of an inch from that line to the edge of my ruler. And I'll go ahead and cut that off. Now your piece will look like this here. You'll see your line, you'll see that you have your 1/4 of an inch seam. And you're going to take your piece and you're just going to roll that up and finger press it so that it's out of your way. Now we'll press it afterward, but just to get it out of our way for now, we're just going to fold these over and finger press them. So now our square looks like this. And we have our 1/4 of an inch seam on each one. And we have each corner, we have a triangle that is our opposite fabric. Okay, I lost my two pieces. I had them. Oh, here they are. Okay. So now I'm going to do the same exact thing that I did before. I'm going to line up my pieces. I'm going to make sure that I put a little clip up in that corner to hold that from shifting on me. Just like so. I'm going to make sure that I have this piece lined up on both sides. And then I'm going to sew across that diagonal line this way from the center down to the bottom. Okay, so we have the top one done. I'm going to go ahead and turn my iron on so I'll be able to press this afterward. Helps to have it warmed up and ready. My small iron takes a long time to heat up compared to my nice Maven reliable iron. And I just had my other piece. Oh, dropped it on the floor. So we're going to do the same thing with the bottom piece. We're going to line it up, making sure that all sides match. We'll put a little clip up in that corner just to hold our piece in. And we're going to sew across that line from the center down diagonally that we marked. And once again, we'll do the same thing that we did before. We'll line up our ruler so that our ruler is on the 1/4 inch marking right across our stitching, and we're going to cut along the edge. And then we'll do the other end. And then we'll fold these. Oh, wait a minute. I didn't do that right. Okay, now I did. I had it set up on the wrong line when I trimmed, so I had trimmed a 1/2 inch of a seam line, and I don't want that. I need the 1/4 inch. That's why it's always best to double check before you cut, because if you cut it too short, you can't fix that. If you cut it too big, that you can fix. Okay, so then we're going to fold those sides up, and we're going to finger press it. And the same with the bottom one. Now it's important when we're pressing these that we make sure that our seam is even, that we don't have any of this fabric overlapped so that it's coming down too far. Because say when you fold it, it's folded like this. You can see in this corner how this corner right here, or the middle over here, is uneven. And this is rolled down. If we were to do that, all of our pieces are not going to match up if that happens. So you've got to make sure that you push these out and finger press them and press them so that your end will be straight. Otherwise, as we put these each together, trying to match up our points going across, they're not going to match up for us. So this is very important that we press this properly. So we're going to do that now. And you want to remember, don't iron. We're going to just press. Now with a piece like this, you start to get a lot of seams crisscrossing each other. And when we go to sew our next pieces to these pieces, it's going to double up our seams even more. So we want to press it well and make sure that it's nice and flat. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to press one side. Get some heat on there. And then I'm going to use my quilter's clapper and just push down on that and let it set for a second. And the reason for the quilter's clapper, I don't know if you've noticed in my previous tutorial with block 6, but this quilter's block clapper rather, what it does is it's a piece of hardwood, and your wool mat or your ironing pad you'll have your heat on your piece of fabric, this absorbs any moisture and holds the heat down onto the top, which helps make your piece flatter. And if you start to get heavier seams, you can actually smack that up and down and then let it sit. And you might have to do that a couple times with a really thick seam, but it makes it flatter and it makes it easier to sew through when you're putting your pieces together. And I just recently started using one, and I'm amazed at how much better my seams are coming out. And you can see, hopefully, from this piece laying here, this piece is bubbled up a little bit in this corner, and this is all nice and flat for me. You truly don't understand how much more this will make seams like this flatter, especially when we start putting these pieces together to make a strip. It's just amazing when you start sewing multiple seams how much that really helps. So we'll do the same to the other side. Just get some heat on there. And the quilter's clapper doesn't have to stay on there long. I just do 1 or 2 presses on it. I let it set for a couple seconds or so, let it cool down, and then remove my clapper. And my piece is all perfectly flat. And that really makes such a big difference in piecing your pieces together. It's remarkable to me, testing it out. But anyways, enough of that. We're going to move along and get to our next part. So once you have all of your square and squares made, then you're going to align them and put them together. Now I've already started this process just because I knew that it was going to take quite a while to get this done. And I didn't want to take up all of our video time with you watching me put each one together, but I'm going to show you the importance of how to put these together. Now I've tested out a few ways, one of them just pinning the top and sewing. And I found that my pieces, my points weren't matching up when I did that. They were moving and shifting on me. So I'll show you what worked for me the best, and then you can decide how you prefer to do your own. And I've already done a strip just to make it quicker, like I said, to test it out and find out the best way to do this. So first I match up my first corner. And I'm going to put a pin in there to hold that in place. And I'm going to match up these points on this side. And the reason why I'm doing that is because if I match up each side, then match up my top, when I go to sew it, all this stays in place for me and doesn't shift. Excuse me. So you're going to be sticking your pin right in the top of this diamond up here. Well, I call it a diamond because now I have it sideways. And I kind of open it up and I look, because I want my pin to be sitting in the very top here of this point, and I want it sitting, now right now it's sitting over to the side of the point. So I'm going to pull it out and I'm going to stick it right in the top of that point. And then I'm going to put my 2 pieces together. I wiggle it a little bit to make sure that my needle, or pin rather, is sitting straight in that piece, and then go ahead and push your pin down. So that side is matched up. Now I'm going to do the same on the other side. Now I'm going to point out to you, these two pieces are both light, so it didn't really matter which way I pressed my seam, and I knew that this would take a little bulk out of my seam. However, all the rest of my pieces are pressed towards the dark fabric, so it doesn't show through. And that's the way I should have done this one, but I kind of goofed it up. So I'm just pointing that out to you, that even I do make mistakes. Okay, so let's finish doing this side. I've got it poked through the top of this point, and I'm going to poke my pin through the top of the other point. And like I said, I'm just going to wiggle this a little bit and make sure that that's lined up straight, and then push my pin through. So now I have both my sides lined up. Now I'm going to line up the side that I'm going to be sewing on. And once again, I have my pin so that it's right in the top, very top of that point. And I'm going to get it into the very top of this point over here and push it through. Wiggle it a little bit, make sure that my pin is sitting straight, because if my pin is sitting to the side like this, it's going to not match up. It's going to sew that way. So I need to make sure that my pin is sitting straight on both sides. And then I can push my pin down through. Now this is a point where I'm going to go backwards. Some people like to use, and I do as well quite often, when I have a hard matchup or when I'm trying to push two seams, put two seams together that are going in the opposite direction that I want to lock together. I want to make sure that as it's going through my sewing machine, that it's not going to have a problem and shift on me. And this temporary glue really helps. Now I'm using a Boheen temporary glue stick. You can get refills for it, so it's really handy. Has a small tip on it, so you're not getting a big gob of glue. And this isn't going to gunk up your needle or cause a problem with your machine, because we're just going to dab a little tiny bit at the top. And if you get too much of a gob, I just take a little bit off with my finger. And this helps when you put your two pieces together. And this washes out. It's not permanent glue, so there's no fear of that at all. So once again, I'll take my pin, I'll push it through, make sure it's at the top of that point and the top of this point. Make sure that my pin is straight. And if you just give that a little press, that glue will hold those together. So this way, when I get close with my needle sewing and I pull my pin out, these two pieces won't shift on me. And we have those glue pens and refills available at Seaside Quilting Supplies. So now we're just going to go ahead and we're going to do a 1/4 of an inch seam right across that top. And you just want to make sure that you get your corner lined up before you get up, as you're going up to your machine, so that that stays nice and straight. Now I don't have my 1/4 of an inch guide foot in at the moment, so I'm just using the 1/4 inch guide on my plate. Now as you go through that seam where the 2 points are meeting up to each other, it's still a little bit thick. So just go through it nice and slow, and it shouldn't shift on you. With the quilter's clapper, it really helped to get those seams nice and flat for me, so it wasn't as bad going through. But if you don't have one, just press it a couple of times or so to get it as flat as you possibly can. It will make your sewing so much easier to match up your points. Because when you're running through bulk, your needle can end up hitting the beginning of that bulk and be a little resistant to go through if it's not nice and flat. So now we can take all of our pins out, and we'll take a little look. And now we have them lined up. So our next step in these, now because of the bulk that there's going to be between these seams, because it was already a little bit bulky with the crossing seams, instead of folding it to one side or the other, I'm going to open my seam up, and I'm going to run my fingernail down through the seam, and I'm going to press this open. Now normally I don't do that. Normally my seams get pressed to the dark side, but where these cross over, that's where you start building up your bulk. And when you put two pieces together that are bulky like that, you've doubled your bulkness. And so rather than having that all bulky and looking funny in there, I'm going to press these seams open. Remember, don't iron. You want to just press. So I've pressed the back side, so now I'm going to flip it over. And I'm going to press the top side. And then I'm going to put my quilter's clapper on there and just press down a couple times and let that set. Okay. And so now that's pretty darn flat right there. If yours is still a little bit bulky, you can smack it a couple times and do it again. You know, just put some more heat on it, put your quilter's clapper on there, smack it a couple times until you get your seam nice and flat like this. It'll just make it so much nicer and smoother. Actually, I'm going to hit this seam up here because it's sitting a little funny to me. There we go. Most of my seams matched up pretty well as I was going along. I do have one that's a little askewed, and I took it apart a couple times and put it back together, and it keeps doing the same thing. So I'm just going to leave it, call it good enough. It's not 100% perfect, but I'm not 100% perfect either. Okay, so now we have that done. Our next step that we're going to do is we're going to add, as soon as I find them, my next pieces. So to match these the little squares that I added onto my bigger squares, I've got the other fabric that matches. So I'm going to lay this down so that we have right side to right side. And I'm just doing this ahead so I can get it done and out of my way, and it will be ready when I get to the point that I'm going to need these. But I figure, so since I'm right here, I'm not sure if in the instructions if they told you to do it later or not, but I'm going to do it now, because if I'm on a part, I like to just continue that part and set it aside, then it's ready when I get to it. So I put a little clip over here just to match up my sides, and I'm going to sew these together, right side to right side, 1/4 inch seam. And I'm going to switch out to my 1/4 inch guide foot just because it makes it a lot easier for me to do. If you don't have one, that's fine. You can just follow your 1/4 inch on your plate. Okay. And my thread broke. I'm probably getting pretty close to the time when I should switch out my needle, but I'm not going to do that right now. I'll do it after this project and remember that it's getting time to switch out the needle. When you start to break your thread, because I've been running through a lot of thicker seams, and I already did the placemats with this same needle, I know it's getting time to switch that out. Make sure I got my thread out of the way. There we go. I'm going to check my bobbin thread while I'm right here to make sure that that's going to catch. Sometimes when it does that, the bobbin thread will pop out of the way, and then you go to sew and you realize that you didn't get it, you didn't get a seam, you didn't sew anything. So it's just best to, when I've busted my thread, I know I might as well just get my bobbin thread situated again so I don't get frustrated with it. And I just trim my threads as I go. It just prevents me from having to sit here and trim all my threads at the very end. And so now that you've added that piece, you're just going to finger press it open. And then you'll press it with your iron. Okay, so that piece is set. We're going to set that one aside. It's all done. And you just want to make sure that when you're putting these together, that you have them, let me see my pattern here. Yeah. So I have this one going this way, and I've attached my piece to the one that ends with the lavender, the lavender garden piece in the center. So I'm going to make sure that when I add my next one, that I do it in the same way. If I add it down here, it's going to flip my design. Now, if you wanted to flip your design, if you want that look, that's fine. You could do that too, but I wanted mine to stay the same way. So I'm going to make sure that I go right side to right side. Once I have them matched up, I'll put my clip up in the corner. So it's all clipped and ready for me to sew. And I'm going to sew 1/4 inch seam down across this one as well. Okay, and the same with that. We're going to finger press it, make sure that it's properly opened. And then we'll just press it. I can see where I have some threads that I forgot to clip as I went. I'm just going to clip those now. Get those out of my way. So then, when you were putting these together, you had 6 square and square that went in a row for 2 strips, and then added your longer strip. For the sides, we have 2 that we put together. 2 on this one, 2 on this one, and we're going to be adding a piece. So I'm just going to take a look at my longer piece. I know on the bottom it's going to be going this way. Since I have a light purple here, I'm going to start with my green since my green is farther away. And I'm going to add my piece up to the top of this lighter green piece, or purple piece rather. So I'll just match that up. Now that's how I want mine. You can go ahead and you can decide how you want yours to line up. There's no quilting police here. You can line things up the way that you want them. And we're going to put right side to right side, and you're going to sew 1/4 of an inch. Now you probably heard me hit a little bulk in that top. When I press it, it will flatten it out more. So once again, and I'm pressing my seam so that it's away from that bulky seam. So it's going in this direction away from it. Just so I can take some of the bulk out of it. And that's what I did on these as well. I had my seam, I mean it's white on both sides, it doesn't matter. So I'm pressing my seam towards this side so that I don't overlap more bulk onto that side. And I'll go ahead and press this one. Set my quilter's clapper on there while I'm doing the next piece. And since I'm wanting to line these up the same way that I did for the other side, I'm going to put this right side to right side. And we'll do our 1/4 of an inch seam on this one. I have a trash can next to me and I still end up with threads on the floor. Okay, so you'll finger press this one the same way that you did your other one. And then press it. And I just set my clapper on there. Let that cool down. Trying not to wrinkle these up. I'm going to set these strips that I made aside for now. And we'll get back to those in a few minutes. So the next part that we needed to do was take our 1 1/4 wide strips, and we're going to sew those the long way across the top and across the bottom. Same thing, 1/4 inch seam, and then press. Now we're going to add our ends. Oh, and you know what? I was supposed to add my ends first. That's why I had those longer. Okay. I'm going to cut 2 new pieces. What you should have done, don't do what I did. What you should have done was you should have sewn your side pieces on first on each end, and then sewn your long strips on. I'm going to cut 2 pieces and then we'll continue. Okay, I should have known that I was making a mistake when I did this, because I went to sew these top and the bottom on and I was like, oh, they're a little too long, so I trimmed them down to size because I wasn't paying attention. So the correct way to have done this, and the way that I corrected it, was I went and cut myself 2 new pieces because I had the extra fabric to do it. So I just went ahead and cut myself 2 pieces and made them the right length to put on the sides. The correct way to do this was that you were to attach your sides first, which were the right length for each side. And if you're following the directions for cuts, your long pieces were to go on after. I will be doing it a little different because of my blunder. So the correct way, once again, would be to put your 2 end pieces on first, press them, doing your 1/4 inch seam, of course, press them, and then put your long ones on. So don't pay attention to me that I messed that up. That's fine. I just go with the flow when I mess something up, and I find a way to fix it. If I didn't have the extra fabric and I would have done that and realized my mistake before I trimmed my other pieces, of course, I could have taken it out and added them the right way. But I was silly and I didn't double check. So to fix my mistake, I have to fix it this way. So don't do what I did. Put your end pieces, the ones that I'm putting on right now were the ones that should have gone on first. And then you would have put your long pieces on. I just want to stress that so that you don't make the same mistake that I made. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to sew these on. I can't believe I did that. So you get to see Terri make mistakes as she's teaching, but we're all human, and we all have our blunder moments. So this would have been your first step, to put these on first. And then you would have put your long ones on after. I was trying to do a little bit ahead so you wouldn't have to see all my sewing. And I could just show you, and that's what happens. And I'm just finger pressing those open after I've stitched them. And then I'll go ahead and I'll press them now. Shouldn't have gotten ahead of myself. Okay, so we have that pressed. We're going to pretend that Terri did not make the mistake. I just have to laugh at myself when those things happen. Okay. Those don't go on yet. Our next piece to go on, oh wait a minute, those are supposed to go on. Oh my goodness. Let me look at this. I did those wrong. I can't believe the mistakes that I have made today. Okay. Regroup. Regroup. You were only supposed to have one square and square and your solid piece. So I'm going to take this apart. Bear with me today. I'm really sorry. I don't want to start the video over because I'd have to take everything apart in order to start it over. So you get to see my blunders today. I apologize. We had some live sales this weekend and I had already cut all this stuff out and prepared it for the tutorial. And I wasn't able to get back and film it until today. And I kind of miscombobulated myself. But that's alright. Hopefully you understand. Things happen. And hopefully you're watching the video before you make yours. Otherwise, you're going to be probably cussing at me. Like, Terri, why'd you show me how to do that? I apologize. I'm not trying to make it more difficult. Okay, so I'm going to take these apart. These will be my two end pieces right here. Make sure I'm taking the right ones apart so I don't mess it up. Usually it's faster to get your seams out, but because I have them very well pressed, my seams are coming out a little slower. So I'm going to go ahead and do that, and I'm going to press these out so that they're nice and flat the way that they should be, and we'll continue. Okay. Enough of making mistakes. Nothing that was critical, though. So I went ahead and I added my green piece onto the end of my purples so that I kept my design going in the direction that I wanted it to go in. And I've got my pieces added to the end. I fixed both of those. I went and pressed these open And now we're going to be adding these to the ends. Now one is going to be going up on this side. Your square and square will be on the top on this side. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to clip the bottom corner so I have these lined up. And I'll put a clip in the center. And then I'm going to go ahead and do my 1/4 inch seam. Just excuse me, open that up, and I'm going to finger press this so that my seam goes to the dark green. And I'll go ahead and press that while I'm right here. Okay, so we have this side done. I have a directional design with the garden lavender, or lavender garden rather, sorry, for my center. So I knew that I need this to be staying so that I know which side is up. So on this end, on the right hand side, I have my square and square on the top. On the left side, my square and square is going to be going on the bottom, just the opposite. And I'll line these up and clip them, or you can use pins, whichever one is your preference. And then I'm going to do my 1/4 inch seam on this side. This really is a pretty easy project to do. It's not super hard. Probably the only real hard part was matching up your points in your square and squares so that they went in a nice line. Once again, we're going to finger press this so that the seam's going to the dark side. And then we'll press that side. Once you have your square and squares done, it gets so much easier after that, because you're just adding border after border. Okay, So now we're going to add the bottom strips to this, or the bottom strip to it. And this is a pretty long piece. So you're going to go right side to right side. I'm going to start down the plain end first, like this whole plain section. I'm going to line that up first. And I'm just going to clip this as I go. And I even do a little clip down here for the corner because I don't like my pieces to shift. So I just do a little bit of extra clipping. Now matching this up is easy, going all the way down, right up until you get to the corner, and that's where we're going to have to match a point again. Now you can pin or clip this as much as you want. That makes you feel secure that you're going to be getting this right. I probably should have started at this end. I think I forgot to subcut my other piece. I can fix that after. So, what you're going to do on this end is you're going to match it up just the way that you matched up the other one. And I'm going to match up the side first rather than the top, making sure that my pin on this side is in that very top center of that point, and then poke it through to this one. Get that lined up and make sure that my pin is straight. And I'm going to clip this corner. And then I can put my pin in there. And then I'm going to match up my top. And the same thing here, you're going to get the pin in so that it's right in the top of that point and right in the top of this point. Make sure your pin is straight when you go to put it in. We don't want it sitting at an angle. And then go ahead and pin it. Now to get this line back up properly, going across. Now sometimes when you're matching two pieces up that you've cut, unless you get them, I start at one end and then I work my way from the other end forward and then have to get it laid out. It was all the right size. It was just a matter of getting it laid out so that it would lay properly. And this pretty much always happens with borders. That when you're trying to match them up, usually I'll fold and find my center start from the center, then clip my ends when I'm doing a long border, and then I work between the center and one end to get it so that it's matched up properly. And then I'll do the same with the other side. So I'm just going to get this all lined up on here so that I can tell that it's all matching up. And I went and put a couple of extra pins and clips in, just so that as I'm sewing it across, it's going to stay nice and steady for me. There. Now I have it all matched up and ready to sew. And I'm going to sew 1/4 of an inch all the way down that side, making sure that I keep my corner lined up. When we get it up to the machine, I just have to lift it up every so often to make sure my clips don't catch on the table and hold my fabric back. And as I'm coming to those opened up seams, I'm just placing my finger there, or you could use an awl, and I'm just holding it in place so that when it goes through, it doesn't catch and push this over, so I end up with a folded over seam. It's definitely going to be a nice long table runner. Okay, and this is the only side that we needed to make sure that we matched up our points. And let me see. We're going to finger press this so that the seam will go towards the green, even though there'll be just a small portion over here that will be on the white. There's just a small portion. So we're going to press this open, just finger press it all the way. And it helps to start doing it from the back side. I don't hard press it, just enough so that when I fold it over, that already kind of knows which way it's going to be going. Then I'm going to fold it over, and now I'm going to finger press from the top all the way across the whole piece. And I can't press this here because I don't have a big enough area. So I'm going to go ahead and take this to my ironing board. I'm going to press that. And then after you've pressed it, your other side, so we have our top side looking like this. So we have our points, you know, our square and squares there. We have, this is the right side, or actually it's the left side. I've got it upside down. Let me show you from this side. Okay, so this is my directional fabric is going up. This is my left side. So I have my point on this, my square and square point going up on this side. I've got all my square and squares on the bottom here. After I press that, I'm going to do the same exact thing. I'm going to take this piece, I'm going to go right side to right side, and I'm going to pin this. So let me go ahead and press that, and then we'll get the top one done. Okay, so now we're going to add our top. And I'm going to start in this corner this time. And I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to clip that corner. And I'm going to match up my points on the side. Same thing, making sure your pin goes in the top of each one of the points and is straight. And I'm going to do the same on this side over here. And I always check it to make sure that I got the pin in where I thought I got the pin in. And so I have my pin in the top of that point, and I'm going to do it on the side. Make sure my pin is straight and my seam is looking straight, and push that through. And now I'll do the top. And I know that's a little extra pinning and stuff, but I don't mind doing it because then I know that my points are going to come together a lot better. Now, not every single one was perfect, but it was pretty close. And it's not like I'm entering this into a contest, so I'm pretty satisfied with how it's coming out. And now that I've got that side done a little bit, because this is a long border, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to start clipping and lining up this end. So I kind of work my end and I shift back and forth to get this lined up. And there might be a couple times when you're trying to line it up that it starts to look like it's not being the right size. Just, you have to keep laying it down and lining it up so that it comes together. And that's true with borders. Whenever I'm doing borders, like on a quilt or whatever, I always do 3 measurements. I do a measurement down the middle, I do a measurement on each side, and usually it's the middle measurement that I end up going with. And I'll cut my border because that helps bring it out square. If you cut your if you sew your border on and it's too long and then you cut it at the end, that's when you end up with those wobbly borders, those wavy borders. So you always want to cut your border to fit. Get this so that it lays down flat. And it does take me a couple minutes of taking clips out and putting clips back in. The only thing that I won't take out is where I've pinned down here, because I need that to match up 100%. Okay, now I've got that all matched up. We'll go ahead and do the 1/4 of an inch all the way down. What? take those pins out. And the same thing, I'm going to finger press this so that my seam is going to be going toward the green. And I'm just doing a light finger press. This thing's getting longer and longer. And then I'm going to take it to my ironing board and I'm going to do a nice press on it. Okay, so now we just have our next strip, which for me is my green strip. These are our 1.5 inch wide. And we're going to do these ones the right way this time. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to clip, I'm doing the right side, then I'll do the left side after. So I'm just going to match this up to the bottom and put a clip in. Once I get it straight. And I'm just going to put a couple clips. And you'll go ahead and you'll do a 1/4 inch seam all the way down that side. Excuse me. Okay, and so we're going to finger press this so that the seam is staying going to the green or to your darker fabric. For me it's green. You might have chosen a different color. That's totally fine. Okay, so we'll do the same on the other side. Just match up your ends and then clip it as you go across. My allergies are starting to kick in again. I've been out walking my dogs during the day, so I get out there where the pollen is. Okay, and so we're going to do a 1/4 inch down this side as well. And my thread decided to come out. And once again, you're going to finger press that out to the dark side So your seam will be going to the dark side. And then we'll press that. So for our next pieces, they had us cut 3. And that's so that we can get the length of the table runner. So I'm going to take one of those and I'm going to cut it in half. And you're just going to join these together. And I'm just going to do 1/4 of an inch. Sometimes you do them the other way. Now, if you want, you can do them the way that you would do binding, where you put them together like this and do your diagonal. I'm going to go ahead and do it this way and just press my seam to one side. So I'm just joining them end to end. Oh my goodness. I'm definitely going to have to change my needle after. Go ahead and trim my threads. And now you're just going to take these and you're going to press them open. Not open. You'll press your seam to one side, finger press rather. And you'll do that with each one. And then you're going to go ahead and you're going to press it. And then check your instructions for the length that you're going to need it. Or you can measure your table runner and see what length you're going to need them. And then we'll get these sewn on. Okay, so I went ahead and I pressed this end of my table runner and I pressed the other end that I sewed on. Now right side to right side, and you'll know your right side because you'll have your joined piece going up. And I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to clip one end of this. And then I'm going to be doing a few clips as I go. So I start the same as the last border. I got to start at one end and kind of lay this out across my table. Now you might have to take this to your cutting table if you don't have enough room at your sewing table to do it. Wherever you have enough room to lay it out. And then I'm going to clip the other end. And then I'm going to keep lining it up. And I'll work back and forth between the two ends so that I can get it lined up properly. Get that other one out of my way. And you're going to do the same for both the top and the bottom of this. The same thing that I'm doing now. And now we'll do our 1/4 of an inch seam all the way down. Okay, so the same as we did on the sides, we're going to finger press this so that our seam goes towards the green or towards the dark side for you. And you'll do that all the way down. And then you'll press it. Remember, don't iron. You want to press it. Just lift your iron and press, press, press as you go. Okay, so I have that finger pressed. You're going to go ahead and do the same on the other side. Go ahead and press both sides of it, and then we'll finish. Okay, so now that we have our green border on, we are going to go ahead and we're going to put on our last border. Now your color choices might be different. That's totally fine. I just got to press this one piece because it did not press the way that I thought it did. And see how that is pressed jumbled up right there? It's not flat the way that it should be. I'm going to press that properly now. There we go. Almost got it. Oh, it was a little further down than I thought. Let me see. And And see, that will make a difference in your size too, if it's not pressed properly. That'll change the outcome, especially on a blog. Okay, we got that fixed. Now, so I have my ends on both sides, the left and the right. Just the way that we did the green ones. And just the way that we did the long green ones, I've attached them together end to end. This is a directional fabric, so I just made sure that the direction of both sides was going in the right direction. And then I'm going to finger press my seams to one side. I took it over to my table and I measured. I'm sure they gave you the measurements in the instructions. I just like to measure myself. It just makes me feel better. So the same as I did with the green one, I'm going to clip on one side first. And once I've got a couple clips in, I'll clip the other end. And I'll work each side to the center, or some people like to fold both pieces and find their center and pin the center first and then pin your ends. I usually do that with a quilt, but since this is just a table runner, even though it's pretty long, I'm just going to do it this way and check as I go to make sure that I'm getting it laid out properly and lined up properly. And I'm going to put several clips in because this is pretty long. Now I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to sew 1/4 of an inch along this whole way. And then I'm going to do the same to the other side. I'm going to clip my other side, my other bottom on, and I'm going to sew 1/4 of an inch and then press it. Now that we finished all of our borders on our table runner, it's so long, it's going to be hard to show it all to you in the camera. It's beautiful. I love the fabrics. I love how all the colors came together. And not only will this be a nice Easter table runner and placemats, but it will also be great for the whole spring. So I think that's just wonderful. Your only thing that you need to do now is sandwich it, put your batting in, put your backing on, and decide how you want to quilt it. Now, I don't know if you do free motion quilting or have a long arm, or if you're just using your sewing machine, that's fine too. That's how I learned how to do free motion quilting. And if you don't know how to do either one of those, you can do stitch in the ditch. Now with the placemats that we did prior to this, you could do stitch in the ditch. And I'm going to get this a little bit closer because what I did was I did decorative stitching on each one of the seams. And because I want the table runner to match, I'm going to do the same with the table runner. And I just think that makes it look a little cute, and it gave me a chance to use some of my decorative stitches, which I don't always get to do. So I'm just going to go along. I'll start with the center seams first, and I'm just going to go along. And when I hit a corner, I'll stop with my needle in the corner and pivot and then go along. So whichever one works best for you is what you'll want to do, is all that I'm trying to say. Is that, and I'm not going to, just to point out, I'm not going to go down each one of these strips. That's just me. You can if you want. It's up to you. I'm just going to go along all the long stretches and the ends. And I'll just circle around. And when I get to the beginning of where I started, I'll go to the next line and go all the way around. So I'll have 1, 2, 3, 4 going around of decorative stitching, and that will hold it together really well, and it will help it to match the placemats that we made. So I hope that you've enjoyed this tutorial. This has been Seaside Quilting Supplies, quilting tutorials from Seaside Quilting Supplies. My name is Terry. I hope that this has been helpful. If nothing else, you have found out that I make mistakes too. That's how it goes. You know, I'm not going to hide it. I'm not perfect. I make mistakes too. And you've seen how I corrected my mistakes. So if this has been helpful, I hope that you'll take a moment and like the video, subscribe to Seaside Quilting Supplies. And right next to the subscribe button is a little bell, and if you click on that bell, you can change your notifications to, you can leave it the way it is, or you can change it to all, so that as more tutorials come available, you'll be able to get notified when those are uploaded. And we have many coming. We're going to be making little fabric boxes to stash your fat quarters and other notions and whatnot in. We're going to be doing some binding tutorials, flange binding, self binding tutorials, along with the regular binding. We're going to be doing some pouches, some bags, and then in I'm not sure if all that's going to happen in April, but we're going to be doing paper piecing, applique. We're going to be making bibs in May and other types of things to do with Mother's Day and so forth. So I hope that you'll come back and you'll see us again, and happy sewing.